listening to the home of cool, irreverent, and entertaining talk right here on LA Talk Radio. You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Art of Love. My name is Lucia. I'm your host and a dating and relationship expert, and I'm here to entertain, educate, and enlighten you about love, dating, and relationships, take your live calls, answer your emails, and speak to authors of books which I find interesting. And this week, I have a second-time guest. He's been on the show before. He actually wrote my favorite book, which is Love Tactics, and luckily he wrote the second book, which is More Love Tactics, an appropriate title. And I'm so glad he did, because the first one was great, has a ton of information, and this one has even more information, and I think it's worth way more than whatever the price is. I think it should cost like tens of thousands of dollars. That's how important this book is. And so I would like to welcome back to the show Mr. Tom MckKnight. How are you doing, Tom?
Hi, Lucia. Thank you. You're always so kind.
Well, it's true.
Well, I appreciate your kind words very much.
Yes.
Thank
you. So of course, the website is lovetactics.com, and More Love Tactics picks up where bestseller Love Tactics leaves off. Based upon the overwhelming response to their first book, authors Tom MckKnight and Robert Phillips provide a host of new, imaginative, and effective strategies to help you win the one you want, or even the one you've lost. So, now,
I have to tell you, Lucia,
yes.
Generally speaking, when I do interviews, it's usually over the foundational work, the first book, and so it has actually been a while since I had looked at my own second book.
Uh-oh.
And there's a funny thing that happens. I don't know if you've written things before.
I have. Okay.
Well, it's funny for all those listeners out there. When you write something, it's very hard to be objective in the beginning. You can't be objective about your own work. You read it, and it's like you can't really tell if it's any good or not. In fact, when I was writing the original Love Tactics, I remember getting almost like 3/4 of the way through the original manuscript, and I thought, well, I better go back and see how this flows. And I went back and I started reading it, and I go, oh, this is not going to fly. And I actually threw the manuscript in the garbage.
Wow.
I was so disappointed. And then I looked in it desperately. I said, oh, I can't do that. I've got too much work in it. And so I pulled it out, and it was only after the book had finally left my hands and had begun to go into publication, and I was getting a response, and I would go back and I read it, and it's almost like someone else wrote the book. You're reading it, and you go, it's pretty good. Well, when the first book did well, my publisher, Rudy Schur, wanted to have me write a second book, and I said, I don't know. I think we've pretty much covered everything in the first book, and I never really felt totally that great about the second book, but when I pulled it out here, and having not looked at it for a long time, I'm able to be more objective. It's like reading somebody else's work,
right? And
I have to thank you, because as I've read it in preparation for this show, it's like, wow, this was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was. In fact, in some ways, it's better than the first book.
It is.
But the foundational principles are still in the first one. But anyway, so I thank you for getting me and heading it in that direction.
Right, and I hope that you'll write a third one, actually. Come on, you have to.
Well, we have to thank Rudy for getting me to do the second one. I don't know if you want me to do a third one.
Well, I want you to do a third one. Forget him.
Well, thank you very much.
So before we talk about the book, I actually found a great article on your website, like I said, lovetactics.com, called What a Man Really Wants. And I think this is really important because it's really true. So you said something interesting. You said that men are vulnerable. So how are they vulnerable?
Emotionally. This is the thing. Well, speaking, I think from the opposite sex perspective, as best I can. If a woman is looking at a man, it's hard for her to interpret, how emotionally vulnerable he really is. He may appear very confident and maybe indifferent on the outside, but every man, I guarantee it. Now I'm speaking as a man. We all have our emotional needs just as surely as, in my experience, all you women do. And if a person gets sidetracked, you can be fooled and think, he doesn't have those needs. He just wants the best looking bimbo he can have on his arm. And the truth of the matter is that is a substitute. Men really need a woman who is emotionally strong and able to love him in spite of who he is, and yet not put up with his guff either, and who's independent enough that she could walk off and leave him if he's out of line. And when he has that kind of a woman in his life, all of a sudden those other superficial things that he seeks after when he doesn't have what he really wants, that's when he'll settle. But the truth of the matter is, a man wants quality. He wants a woman who is emotionally strong and able to love him in spite of himself. And and that doesn't mean a woman who thinks that letting him walk on her or use her is loving him for who he is. But if she'll meet all of those emotional needs, concentrate on those, and be emotionally strong herself, she can win his heart over and above all of the superficial things we usually associate and think that a man wants.
Right, and in fact you said what he needs, what he wants, is validation. Right,
and that's kind of what we, in the first book we laid the foundation for that. There's 5 emotional needs that we all have to need to be validated. The needs for attention, understanding, acceptance, appreciation, and affection, and by that I mean physical touch, where you someone well enough that they can put their hand on your shoulder or touch you in a that is a validating thing. But you first have to have the emotional interaction first before that means anything. But those things are validating to us as human beings to say we have worth, and we can be relieved of the fears that we have secretly, that we walk through life with. There's an old classic movie, and I refer to that in the article. The movie Harvey with
some guy.
It's
Jimmy
okay. Stewart.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Just having a brain freeze. Yeah. Anyway, there's a psychologist in there who's evaluating everybody else, but all of a sudden he gets in an emotional, vulnerable position, and he acknowledges that a man's greatest desire is just to be able to be on the couch, the psychologist's couch himself, and have some woman reassuringly stroke his forehead and say, "Poor boy, poor boy, poor boy." I mean, it was a funny image in the movie, but there's a lot of truth to it. A man needs a woman who can be there for him. In a lot of ways, we're looking for surrogate parents, substitute parents. Whether we had great parents when we were being raised or whether we didn't when we get married, we need someone who emotionally we feel is able to provide that continuing care for us.
Okay. So
go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, we're just all emotional beings who need to be taken care of. We want to be taken care of. We want to be strong and we want to be independent, but there comes a time in our life when we want to be able to rely upon someone else. And so when we go out and we're involved in dating, okay, you compare this to your own experience. Mm-hmm. You're not looking for a man who needs to be taken care of. I mean, there may appeal to a maternal instinct part of
mm-hmm.
you, but I mean, really, we want, when we're searching and looking at all the people who we could be with, mm-hmm. we're looking at someone who ultimately we would be able to emotionally lean on ourselves.
Right.
And then then of course we want to be there for them as well. But ultimately, we need somebody who's strong enough to be able for us to lean on them. And ultimately, what happens in a lot of relationships that destroys them is that as soon as we find the person that we really like, we surrender ourselves and want to start leaning on them and depending upon them, and that turns them off. And because it's not meeting their needs, it has to be a give and take situation for both parties. We have to be able to show them that we can survive without that person and be happy even without them. Then they see that, wow, this person is strong enough. They don't need me. Mm-hmm. They seem to be willing to meet my needs, but they don't have to have me in their life for them to be happy. Right. And that attracts us to them. Ideally, the best relationships are two independent people who are willing to lean upon each other, but not so desperately needing that they can't be happy without each other.
Well, that is the goal. Now, you said something very interesting in this book. You said a person in love feels 90% friendship, 9% respect, and 1% passion. So I'm wondering, do you remember how you came up with that formula? Because it seems more like it usually feels like it's 90% passion.
Well, yeah, that's a good. I don't remember how I came to that, but I know that I did not have the marriage experience behind me that I do since then, and I can tell you that is absolutely the way relationships work in the long run, is that you need someone who you can really be good friends with. The passion is the spark. It's like a keg of gunpowder. The gunpowder is not all passion. The gunpowder is really the acts of kindness towards one another, the acts of respect, but also showing the emotional independence that we have ourselves. It's having a good relationship with a person. Then there's a fuse. There's this little fuse goes off of this keg, and you light that fuse, and it goes down, and it explodes the entire keg. And that's the passion. Mm-hmm. If you just have a little bit of passion, it makes all of the friendship just euphoric.
Wow.
But without that spark, if you don't have any passion or any strong desire for the other person, mm-hmm. Then you're going to take all of that. It's going to be, a keg of gunpowder is just inert matter. It's just sitting there and is never detonated.
Right, then you're just in the friend zone. So then you also...
Yeah, right, and you can have it all. I mean, a lot of people are very, very close, good friends, but they've never detonated the friendship with the fuse of desire. And desire comes by you want what you can't have. If a person feels that they can be too confident that they've got you in the palm of their hand, then there's no fuse to detonate the friendship. A lot of people, on the other hand, you can relate to this. I'm sure you've seen this. Mm-hmm. People are in a relationship where they really are good friends and love each other, but it hasn't been detonated with that spark. Maybe by one of the parties wants the other, but that's not reciprocated.
Right.
And so what it takes is for the one who's being taken for granted, for example, to finally just say, you know what, I love you, I care about you, we have a good relationship, but I've got to move on with my life. I'm still looking for the person I'm going to be with. And the one who's doing the taking for granted says, wait, what do you mean you're going to leave me? And yes, I'm going to leave you because it's just not working out. And so they break up.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few days or weeks, the one who was taking the other for granted before now begins to realize that, hey, I'm losing this person, and the desire has a chance to assert itself. We only miss what we can't have. And so then the person finally says, you know what, I've got to have you. I want you. And depending how difficult of a time they have winning the person back, their passion goes higher and higher until finally they win the person back, and then they're excited to be married to that person that they've been friends with for years before that. I didn't say that very well, but did you understand
right.
the basic
what I was trying to say? Yeah, I think we understood it. You explained it quite well. Now,
in other words, you can be in a relationship and take each other for granted for years and be friends. Then somebody breaks up, and now all of a sudden they have the passion they lacked before.
Right.
Because now and passion is not. I'm not talking about sexual dynamics here. I'm talking about emotional, psychological dynamics of wanting something that you feel like you're losing or you can't have.
Got it. Okay, so moving on, you also said to ignore what your partner says and does while you're trying to win them over. Now, that's hard to do, so why do you say that?
Well, if you proceed on principle and understand that there's like this thing called the delayed reaction effect, and it happens a lot. Someone shows an interest when you're first getting to know somebody. Someone out of the blue, let's say it's a guy, he suddenly starts showing interest towards a girl who had no clue before that this guy was romantically attracted to her, and all of a sudden he seems to be interested in her, and she doesn't know how to respond. So the guy comes on to her, and she seems indifferent to him, and it hurts his feelings. And he backs off and goes home and licks his wounds and thinks, wow, I really made a fool of myself there. And so he's not gonna put himself out towards that girl again. Mm-hmm. Well, meanwhile, the girl goes home and she starts thinking, I've never thought of him in that way before. He is cute. He is nice. I like this guy. Wow, I think maybe there's hope here. And so she begins to get a little interest in her heart, and now she's cultivated. Now she's a little more ready to respond at his next sign of interest. Problem is, 9 out of 10 guys have been rebuffed, feeling that rebuff, are not going to make the next effort. And so they're going to miss the opportunity. Whereas if they came back and were just as, I'm not talking about being fawning or
stalking.
or what's the word, acting desperate towards the girl, but if they came back and just seemed to continue to show enough interest to give her the opportunity to respond, then she would start responding. And it works the other way too, for if the girl is the one who's showing the continued interest and the guy was caught off guard. But since 9 out of 10 guys will come home and they'll say, oh, that's it, I'm not making a fool of myself again. The next time the two of them run into each other, the girl is happily looking forward to his show of interest in her so she can respond.
Right.
And the guy never does it.
Right.
And the girl thinks, what a phony.
Right.
He was just putting on before. He wasn't really interested in me. Whereas if the guy had this this understanding that you just proceed on principle, you continue to be nice, you continue to show interest in a person, you do everything the right way, and don't back off simply because she hasn't shown interest yet. Then when he shows interest again, then she can start to respond. And I've seen that many, many times with a lot of guys who do understand that principle, and they'll hang in there. And in fact, once I came to understand that principle myself, it's how it worked with my wife. She was not initially interested in me, and but I hung in there. I didn't overwhelm her, and I wasn't overbearing in knocking down her door, but I did just keep coming back until the point came where she was ready to start responding, and finally did.
Yeah, also because usually, like, when, let's say, like with myself, let's say I'll be interested in someone, but maybe I'm not committed to them, and then someone else will come along, and I wasn't thinking about being with someone else because I'm thinking about this other person, but now this other person is showing interest, and at first I might not really care because it's like, well, sorry, my mind is over here, I'm thinking about someone else, but as the second person shows interest and they exhibit qualities that I like, and they're nice, et cetera, then I start going, well, maybe I might be interested in guy number 2. So I can see how that it might take some time.
Yeah, it's a matter of George Washington said, friendship is a plant of slow growth, and we cultivate friendship by being friendly. And if we're friendly just once or twice and then stop, it stops cultivating it from the other person. We might think, well, they have just as much of a responsibility to be friendly towards us as we do to them. But most people are not that way. Most people are not what you call proactive.
Right.
Most people are reactive. They will sit back and wait until life comes to them, which is, really to the person's advantage who's proactive, because the whole world is basically your oyster. You go out and you behave in a way that is positive, and you're going to get positive results back eventually. But the person who just sits back and waits for things to come to them, most of the time
they're still waiting.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Okay. So then you also said, don't let your emotions take the driver's seat. But of course, it's very hard to keep your emotions under wraps and to control them. So how can we do that? Well,
let's say this. Go ahead, let them go. Just let your emotions take over, but don't show it. That's fine as long as you can close the door and you are.
Freak out.
Jumping up and down. I saw a cute little movie one time. There was a guy and girl that met at a college, and they kept bumping into each other in the elevator and stuff. And he found out who she was. She found out who he was, but they had never met. And finally, he just screws up all his courage, and he gets the information, and he calls her on the telephone. And her roommates give her the phone, and she says, they say it's a boy. Oh, really? She comes on the phone, and he says, this is so-and-so. And he tells her his name, even though they've never met. Well, she knows exactly who it is. And she puts her hand over the receiver. She jumps up and down. She's going, oh, the roommates are jumping up and down with excitement. And then she takes her hand back out the receiver, and she says, who? And so by her controlling at least how her emotions appear, by appearing cool, it was able to maintain his interest. I can tell you as a guy that if I called a girl and I heard all this screaming and excitement in the background, it wouldn't disappoint me. A guy's ego is stroked by that kind of stuff, but the first thought that he has is,
he's got her.
I got her. Okay, good. Okay, we'll have a nice date. But already, this is just human nature, is to take her and put her up here on the shelf even before the date and say, okay, I got that one. Now who else can I add to this list? And start looking around. And so guys and girls want the one that's hard to get. And so if you are too demonstrative about letting the other person see your emotions that they've got you, you're going to lose them. It's psychology. It's the way it works.
So then, how long do you have to play hard to get until they ask you to marry them?
Well, you're going to hate hearing this, but no, it's. I mean, in the very, very beginning, you are dissembling. You're shielding. You're not. That person doesn't have any right yet to see how you're really feeling. As they demonstrate more and more commitment to you, you can show more and more how you care about that other person. But even after you're married, you must retain a certain degree of strength and independence, so that your spouse will know that they cannot cross you. In other words, you cannot marry a guy and think, okay, he's committed to me now, and so I can just show him how much I love him. I mean, it's okay to show how much you love him and everything, but don't ever get to the position where he could go out and be unfaithful to me, and I would still be here for him. If a man gets to feeling that a woman, he could do anything, and she's going to be a doormat for him, it lessens his resolve to appreciate her and to respect her. So to some degree, throughout your marriage, there has to be some degree of your partner realizing that there's a line that they cannot cross in disrespecting you.
Right.
And I think in a number of marriages that mistake is made. Someone loves the other person so much and goes out of their way to reassure them so much, because that's the way their heart feels, so constantly overflowing with this feeling of love, that the one they love begins to first unappreciate what they're getting, then they disrespect it, and then they begin to actually despise the person. And that's the dynamics that I've noticed in abusive relationships. The one party allows the other person to abuse them, and the person who does the abusing, although they're in the wrong, despises and hates the person who's allowing the abuse, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. I mean, you don't want to marry anybody in the first place who would ever be abusive, but there is that nature for all of us to tend to take people for granted if they allow us to. So in order to maintain a person's devotion and love, you have to maintain a certain degree of independence where you will not tolerate being disrespected or abused. So that continues, in my opinion, throughout your life and forever.
Great.
You just you cannot ever lay down totally and say, I just love you so much. I know you're going to take care of me forever, and my dreams have all been satisfied, and bingo, the next thing you know, the guy has done you wrong.
Right.
And it isn't just the guys. More commonly, I will say, it's generally the man who will do wrong to the woman more often, but I have seen it the other way too, because I've known some very fawning men, men who just can't do enough for their wife, and she just begins to get this feeling that she could do no wrong, and then she disrespects him, and I've seen them be as bad as some of the bad men.
Right. Yes. It's like a spoiled child. So
exactly.
Yeah, you let them get away with whatever, and they just keep getting worse and worse. You create a little monster that you got to kill.
Ideally, I mean, a perfect human being would not ever disrespect you or
well, there's no perfect human being.
Be turned off by your lack of independence. But in reality, those kind of perfect people are far and few between.
Right, they're saints. So now in the section on winning back the one you've lost, you talk about competition, and you say to not fear your rival, but that's often hard to do.
Well, yes. Well, if you act on principle, I mean, there's
on tactics.
You maximize your chances for success. But when you start to panic and start to try to take shortcuts, and instead of showing that you can live without the person as well as you may want to be with them, and it's okay to show that. But if you show signs of desperation in jealousy and insecurity about a rival, then it makes you less attractive. It weakens your hand in the very contest that you're trying to win. Your love pursuit is going to be more impressed when they think that you're not affected by whatever competition you may face from the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
to you?
Absolutely. But it so goes against one's emotions, because your emotions are screaming no, and you're supposed to be like, oh, that's fine. No
right.
problem.
I mean, there may be times when the other person, your competition, is going to win, but your chances of that happening are much better if you don't show signs of weakness while it's happening. It doesn't mean that. Let me just. I'm thinking back on one experience I had. There was a girl I was pursuing, and then all of a sudden, a friend of mine came into the situation, and she obviously liked the friend more than she liked me.
Uh-oh.
And it was very disheartening. It was. It crushed my ego, but I had a choice at that point, and so what I did is I just maintained the relationship the best I could without showing signs of panic or anything towards that other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asked me one time, how come you're continuing to pursue this girl? Now, I wasn't pursuing her strongly. I was just keeping in contact and keeping my
presence known.
Keeping my options open, and maintaining contact with her the best I could while she was falling in love with this other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why do you continue to do that? I said, life turns on a dime. You just do not know what will happen tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean, this other guy, he was my friend. I said, he could be killed. You don't know what's going to happen.
Or you could have him killed.
Well, oddly enough, he was in an accident and died.
Oh my God!
And anyway,
wow.
It's so. And then, without complicating the
wow.
whole situation here, opportunities opened up again, and ultimately, I came to realize that this was not the one that I was looking for, but there was definitely a turn of events, so that it was within my parameters for it to happen. So, but then again, she may have married him, and that would have just been something I would have had to accept at that point in time. We don't have perfect control over the universe. I don't live there anymore, but I used to live in Las Vegas for half a century of my life.
Wow.
And Las Vegas is, they built, of course, they're going through a hard time now, but they built a palatial empire in Vegas, not by winning every hand. They just simply have the odds slightly in the favor of the casino, and bingo, over time, they win. And what Love Tactics teaches in the book, Love Tactics, and the book More Love Tactics, and on our website, lovetactics.com, is how to maximize your odds. So that instead of sabotaging yourself, we are in the best possible position to come out ahead in the long run.
Wow, that's a great analogy, the Vegas analogy, because I think everyone understands that one.
Well, love is even better than we'd rather have a fulfilling love life than no fulfilling love life and own Las Vegas. It's love is more satisfying, but yes, it's exactly
okay.
to increase your odds so that you can be the winner in the long run.
That's right. So moving on now, of course, every relationship has issues, and you say that rocky roads actually make relationships stronger, but you would actually think it's the opposite.
Well, it depends how you handle it. How you handle each situation.
Mm-hmm.
When you show, let's by a rocky road, meaning that the person that you're pursuing begins to waver, and they don't. You think things are going great, and they're in love with you, and they like you, and now all of a sudden they're not so sure. There's another guy, or it was going too quickly for them, or they've got family problems that are impacting them that you don't even know about. And so you are you're faced with some potential rejection. Well, the best way to handle that, and this makes it stronger, is that you show that, well, if this isn't going to work out, I wish you well, and I'll go on and I'll be okay. I'll be happy. Not this clinging vine stuff, not throwing your arms around the legs of the person. Please don't leave me. No.
That's in the movies.
I had someone I knew many years ago, and he was anxious to get married, and he found a lovely girl, and they were going out, and it seemed to be progressing, and he said he proposed and she accepted. But when he told me how she accepted, it sounded like she was hesitant.
Uh-oh.
And so she wasn't totally 100% committed to this thing. And so I watched it from afar, and then he came to me and he says, I'm worried. She's starting to vacillate on me. She's having second thoughts. She's having doubts. And I said, well, do you really want to marry this girl? Because if you don't, this is your chance to honorably get out of it and just let her go. He says, no, I want to marry her more than anything else in the world. I said, okay, so now we can say this is a rocky road at this point in time.
Uh-huh.
I said, okay, if you really want her, you need to go to her and say, I see that, you're not real sure about this. Why don't we postpone this and you give me the ring back and we'll give the second thoughts. Oh, no, I can't say that. Why can't you do that? No. He says, no, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to rock the boat. He says, because, okay, let's be honest. The reason he didn't want to rock the boat was because he's afraid that if he takes the ring back, that will just clear the road for her to leave him, and he'll lose her forever, which is true. Yeah. But on the other hand, if he had done that, she would have seen that, hey, he is a strong enough guy. He can go on. He can find somebody else, and he's willing to leave me. He could be happy without me, and it would reassert her admiration and respect for him. I'll say this. The guy is about as perfect a guy as I've ever known. And he did marry someone else, and what a lucky girl she was, because he's been the best husband and father for the last 25, 30 years. And so girl number one would have been very, very lucky to have him, but it was an emotional thing. It was a psychological problem. The rocky road was that he seemed like he wanted her too much, and she couldn't be sure that he really wanted, that he was worthwhile. If anybody wants you too much, Groucho Marx said, there was an exclusive club, I think it was in San Francisco, 100 years ago, who knows, and they invited him to join after he became famous and successful, and he said, I turned them down. He says, any club that would want me in it, it can't be all great. And that's how we are with people. Anybody that wants us too bad, there must be something wrong. I can't see what's wrong, but I just sense there must be something wrong. And that's how it was with my friend. He was so he's the kind of guy that you could mistreat him and he would still be there for you.
Yeah, it's not good.
So, so he didn't give the ring back, and so he didn't take the ring back, and ultimately she gave it back to him, and they never, she went on and married somebody else. And as I said, he went on and married somebody else too, and I'm sure everything worked out okay for everybody in the long run. But he could have been fine and happy with that first girl and not gone through that if he'd had the strength to handle the rocky road by just showing that, hey, you know what, I'm not being mean, not being cruel to her, not being, arguing or fighting with her or saying, you can't appreciate me, I'm going somewhere else. But, just showing respect for her feelings and saying, I wish you well. You can go on and find somebody else. And bingo, it was a psychological thing that I'm sure she would have reasserted her ability to see what a great guy he really was, and they would have married and been a very happy couple to this day.
So you said that communication is like 95% of what bonds a love relationship?
I say that again. Communication is 95% of what goes on in a love relationship. How did you say that?
Communication is 95 is what. I didn't question this right. I didn't write this right down. 95% of what bonds a love relationship is communication.
Okay. Yeah. If you get into the etymology and roots of communication. I mean, communication is becoming one mind, to bring our minds together. And obviously, the more our minds meld, we become one. We bond, and so learning how to communicate is a real biggie. In the first book, Love Tactics. In the first book, we tried to concentrate on how to win the one you want. In the second book, we tried to kind of focus on if things went wrong and you lost the one you want, how would you get them back? Mm-hmm. But it's all basically the same principles. But in the first book, out of all of the love tactics we listed, I said if you have to throw them all out except for one, the one tactic you want to hold on to is reflective listening. And reflective listening is to be able to look a person in the eye and let them say whatever they want to say, whether it's cruel to you or whatever, and to not get defensive, and to be able to empathize with what they're saying, to come to understand their feelings rather than to try to dissuade them that they are not seeing life the way it is, or to try to change their mind or criticize them in any way, but simply to comprehend what it is that they're feeling and to express that back to them in reflective words, not exactly their words, but other words that encompasses what they're trying to say in such a way that they feel genuinely listened to and understood. That's probably one of our greatest needs emotionally. Back to the validating person. You validate a person more by listening to them and showing that you have tried to grasp the essence of what they're saying. Because 99 out of 100 people, it's even higher than that, people who we talk with in regular life, a conversation goes like this, I'm thinking of something I want to say to you, and then while I'm expressing my words, you're thinking of the thoughts that you want to get out to express how you feel, and then while you're speaking, I'm trying to think of the words to express how I'm feeling, and so it's a verbal ping pong match. It goes back and forth and back and forth, whereas when you're really reflective listening, you're really listening to what the person has to say, and instead of popping back with your counter attack on something you want that other person to understand, you go ahead and grasp what the other person is saying. And so, Lucia, what you've said here is that you're feeling such and such, and you think this is the way that's this certain aspect of life is, and you are kind of shocked because you're not used to this kind of exchange with somebody, but it's a pleasant thing. It's like water to a man who's in the desert and so extremely thirsty, and you say, yeah, that is how I feel. And the next thing you want to do, as soon as you've had your first experience ever of somebody actually showing interest and understanding what you're trying to say, is you want to add to that and clarify a little more about what you're saying. And if the person is really wise and smart about it, they're going to listen even deeper to what your new expression, and they're going to again say, oh, so you're saying this and this, and by the time you finish a conversation with that, you're hooked on the other person. You want to be around that person as much as possible because it's such a gratifying and validating experience to feel understood by another human being who's not trying to
judge,
convert you or challenge you or criticize you or judge you in any way.
Right. In fact, I know this girl, and she travels a lot and she meets a lot of guys internationally, and so and all the guys she dates end up falling in love with her. And what happens is, because they're not in the same city, they do a lot of talking on the phone, over Skype or whatever, and so there's a lot of talking and communication and getting to know you going on. And then when they do get together, then it's that much better, and all these guys fall in love.
With all these guys. So where's the breakdown? Since
not at the same time.
She selected. What's that?
I'm not saying she's dating a bunch of guys at the same time. I'm just saying every guy that she's dated ends up falling in love.
Okay. And so what you're saying is that they're attracted to her and they like what they're hearing in the form of just communication. So it's got to be verbal because it's over the phone and in long distance type of stuff. So she's apparently doing something right.
Yeah, because most people think, oh, well, especially women think, well, I'll jump into bed with him and then he'll be really attracted to me. Or they seek to do it through action, but they don't understand that by listening to the other person, that really bonds them to you if you listen, like you said, reflectively.
Right. Now, let me just take another twist with this, and because with your friend, it may very, very well be that she's got these communication skills we're talking about, and that is hooking these guys in, which is good. Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing. A guy needs to be filled out validation, but sometimes a girl in long distance relationships. It can happen both ways, but this happens a lot. Men tend to be sexual predators. You may have noticed that a time or two.
Uh-huh.
And guys instinctively know how to cultivate a woman, and they're perfectly willing, to take women in long distance relationships because they're satisfying their sexual needs with someone close at hand. And but the next time they're going to visit that city, they would like to have somebody there, so they will sometimes feign interest in someone long distance, and the girl can misinterpret that and think, oh, he really likes me. That's why, we haven't had any kind of physical relationship, and yet he still keeps in touch with me after all this time. You have to be on guard because a lot of times they have a list. They've got Seattle and Portland and Toronto, and they've got girls in every city, and they just kind of keep them on
call.
Yeah, they keep in contact with them because they know someday they're going to get back to that city, and this is going to, and then they're going to score. That's their intent. So to those kind of, to prevent that,
mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, you're sexually attractive to a man. It's a lot of time what a man is after. But if you let him eat the carrot, I mean, it's the carrot in front of the nose of the horse.
Uh-huh.
Then it's gone. You've lost your allure.
Right.
So the best thing is, his motives may not be all that pure in the beginning, but you just have to be one better than him. You go ahead and you develop the relationship long distance, and you show the emotional validation, but you don't allow yourself to be sexually used when the guy comes into town, just because he's been, talking to you on the phone long distance. Otherwise, he will just, you then go into the bin of someone to use whenever I'm in town until she doesn't let me use her anymore. And meanwhile, they're still cultivating other contacts in other places. That's just.
Right.
I have another article.
Uh-huh.
Gosh.
What's the name?
You know what? I don't know what the URL is off the top of my head,
uh-huh.
but that talks a little bit more about this. I'll give this to you off
okay.
When we're off this conversation, sure. And you can put that link on your site for anybody who might be interested in that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, just email it to me because we're actually at the end of the show, unfortunately. We could talk forever.
Oh, wow.
we
I hope I haven't done too much of the talking here, Lucia.
You know what? We need to have a show together where we answer emails. People present their emails, and then you give the love tactics.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah?
I think actually, I think that'd probably be a lot easier than just taking it off the cuff the way we were doing it.
I know, because there's so much I didn't cover, but obviously there's no time. But we'll discuss that. We'll see. Maybe we can do that once in a while, once a month or something. We'll have you on answering emails or something.
All right. I'd be happy to do that.
I know, because I love these tactics. So, okay, as everyone, I'm sure.
Well, visit us at lovetactics.com
yes.
or the books, Love Tactics or More Love Tactics, and be happy to visit with any of your
listeners,
your people, anytime.
My peeps. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks so much for being on. It was great as usual, and of course, I learned more. So I'm happy to go off and use my newfound knowledge, as I'm sure everyone else is too.
All right, I'll email you that link, and you can put it on your site.
Great. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
God bless you. You have a good day, Lucia.
You too. Bye. Bye, Tom.
Bye-bye.
All right. So we've come to the end of another show, another great show. Isn't he wonderful? He's got so many stories. I only got through like half my questions, but I definitely have to have him on again answering emails. And you can send those emails to my website, which is theartoflove.net, where you can also sign up for my newsletter, and there's videos on there and latest updates and just all kinds of things. There's always things going on. That's theartoflove.net, and my book, Lucia's Lessons of Love, is at lessonsoflove.net, and that site was recently updated. Now there's 2 little videos on the homepage, so you can check those out. And in the meantime, by the way, thanks for joining me, but in the meantime, remember that love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.
You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.